Happy Camper Radio, episode 45. Come on, let's go camping. Hello once again, and it is so good to be back. You're in tune with the Happy Camper Radio Show. I'm Skip. I am a happy camper, and no doubt about it, my friends, you can be one too. The cold and flu season is upon us, and last week, my friends, I was down and out for the count like you wouldn't believe. You know, last week at this time, I had not a voice in me. I was communicating by paper and pencil. Believe me, it was that bad. But that is now behind me. I did everything I was expected to do. I stayed in the sleeping bag. I got plenty of rest, drank plenty of fluids, took my medication, and I don't want to say I am completely 100% cured. If I happen to squeeze out a cough every now and then during the program, well, Adobe Audition has some great software with some fantastic editing tools in there, and I can very simply go ahead and knock that out and before I publish the show and get it on out to you. So you'll never know anything ever happened. But anyway, I'm so glad to have you back here with us. Our phone number is 404-537-CAMP. You can give us a call anytime with your camping questions, your comments, your concerns, even if you have a show idea. We would love to hear from you. We always enjoy hearing from our listeners. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Camp Talker, and add us to your circles on Google+. Of course, you can access any one of our social media sites very simply by going to our homepage, which is www.happycamperradio.com. And please, if you haven't already done so, make sure you click on our RSS feed, and this way you can subscribe to the program and never miss a single episode of our show. Let's take a moment to get the campfire lit. The firewood has been sitting exactly in the same place it has been for the past 2 weeks, and I just managed to grab a few logs and throw it on the fire and get everything all tuned up and ready to go. Grab a friend, grab a family member, anybody you want to bring along. We always have room for one more at this campsite. We are the place to be. This is the Happy Camper Radio Show. I want to take a moment right now to reach out to a couple newcomers who actually reached out to us this past week on Google+. And we have here, let me pull my notes up in front of me. First of all, Action Donation Services, and also to Roger Ford of Ford RV Training and Service in Benton, Kentucky. Thank you so very much for reaching out to the Happy Camper Radio Show and being part of our great camping family that we have here each and every week on the program. Here's an interesting question, and I'm going to, in a way, tie how I came down with a cold this week into today's show because it does play a significant role. But a very unusual question I'm going to throw out at all of our campers right now. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to go camping in your automobile? Now, before you throw the brick at your speakers, before you say, how crazy am I for even suggesting something like that, I want you to know that this past week, I was forced to do exactly that, along with thousands and thousands of other people. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about because you know I live in the Southeast, and what happened a week and a half ago. It was the North and Central Georgia winter storm. It's the one big storm that we have each and every year. And this one, my friends, caught a lot of people by surprise, but it really didn't have to be that way. What we ended up having was a winter storm with very little notification from the local and state officials. And it caused chaos. It caused a lot of people some unexpected time on the road. It caused people to camp out in their vehicles, and I'm not just talking commuters, I'm talking school children too. For those of you who have been following the national news reports that were broadcast back there on the 28th and 29th, because those were the dates of the big storm. And yes, my friends, this did make national news stories. And the local and state governments didn't look very good in the end of this here, because they were the ones who really dropped the ball. First of all, the National Weather Service, who issued the alerts, eventually named this storm Winter Storm Leon. They are the ones that were responsible for naming storms. So, and of course, we didn't hear that name broadcast all that often throughout this storm and even afterwards, but it did have an official name. Mostly everyone was focused on the storm itself and the after effects and what havoc it really wreaked on people's lives. The storm warning originally went out to central Georgia, and that was a few days before the storm actually struck. It actually hit the metro Atlanta, the South Metro Atlanta area on Monday morning at 3:22 a.m. Now, here was the kicker. The storm eventually moved northward unexpectedly, and as a result, winter storm warnings were issued for the entire metro Atlanta area. That was by the National Weather Service. What were the state and local officials doing at that time? Well, we'll get to that. And why am I actually bringing this up and including it as part of today's program here on the show? Well, because I want you to see what it could be like if you ever got caught up in a winter storm and you were out on the road. I don't care if it was on a back street. I don't care if it was on a major interstate. But if the winter weather struck and you were caught by surprise, and it caught you very unexpectedly, and you were actually forced to spend the night in your vehicle, would you be prepared to do that? I'll tell you a little later on in the show exactly how I survived the night. And we're also going to take a look at what you can do to prepare yourself and your family in the event you have your family in your vehicle with you at the time of such a storm, and what you can do to actually get through the night until either one, help arrives, or till things clear up and you can move along and get to your final destination. The city and state, like I say, was totally unprepared for this. Back on the 28th and 29th, again, it made local and national news stories, and the Atlanta mayor and the Georgia governor were getting blasted. They were getting hammered by not only members of the news media, but also their constituency as well. The forecast by the local and state officials were not taken seriously at a time when they really should have been. As a result of this, kids were sent to school that morning, folks went on to work, and people went on about their everyday lives. I would like to think that everybody carries a weather radio with them. I don't. I'm sure you don't either. Some of you may have winter weather radios at home, and it's a good $25 investment if you want to go out and get one. You will be alerted to these storms, and I don't know exactly how they work, but if it's any guess, they probably are in a standby mode, and when a weather alert is issued by the National Weather Service or whatever authority it is, a storm warning or storm watch will go out, and everybody who has one of these radios will be alerted. I don't also carry my smartphone with me, but I am not constantly on the lookout for weather warnings. I will go ahead and look through the local and national news stories from time to time, and I use my smartphone, of course, for other purposes. I'm sure you do too. But a lot of folks do rely upon our local and state authorities in this region here to keep us advised anytime a winter storm watch or a winter storm warning is issued. The problem was, in this case, a lot of the officials were very nonchalant about it. It was like, we'll take a wait-and-see approach. And something else. Even days before this storm struck, there were some national weather media outlets that were putting people on alert. They were talking about it. because the National Weather Service had already issued some of these alerts and some of these warnings. In fact, I'll go through those with you here in just a little bit to give you an idea what happened prior to the storm striking the metro Atlanta area, where thousands of people, like I say, were stranded overnight and into the next day. Just to give you an idea what kind of alerts went out and what our local and national, or not national, but our local and state leaders were doing at that particular time. Now, by the time the storm struck, and this was on January the 28th, by the time the elected officials reacted, it was already too late. Because here was what happened. Students and teachers were released from school early. Some of them were, some of them went out at their normal time. The private sector employees began heading home. Government employees were dismissed early. Local educators hit the roads heading for home. We had people who were traveling the interstates as part of their normal everyday travel. And keep in mind, too, metropolitan Atlanta area is a very big city. So we have a lot of truck vehicle traffic coming in and out of the city at all times of the day and night. I'm talking tractor trailers. I'm talking drivers who are moving lots of product and lots of good in and out of the city. So the roads are going to be jammed with motorists. And by the time that alert went out, by the time the elected officials did react, it was already too late. So how did things get so bad all so sudden? Well, here's what happened. We did get some snow showers earlier in the afternoon. Keep in mind, I'm a night owl. I am up most of the night. I sleep off and on during the day. I would love to get a full 8 hours of sleep during the day, but it just doesn't happen. Even though my room where I bed down, should I say, for the day and not the night, unless, of course, it's the weekend, that room is completely dark. I cannot have the slightest ray of sunshine coming into my room, or it'll keep me up. So I darken my room, and I don't know if it's a psychological thing or not, but if I lay down during the day and I'm laying in this completely dark room, maybe the idea that I know on the outside it is daylight is maybe preventing me from sleeping. But anyway, bottom line here is I don't get a whole lot of sleep during the day. I can tell you this much. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 28th of January, when this storm hit, we had a few snow flurries. I don't want to say flurries. Well, we had a few showers, too. And I started to see in my front yard where it was beginning to lay. The roads, however, apparently was not cold enough for the snow to stick to the roadway, and the snow was melting. And this is exactly what it was doing on the interstates and on the back roads. The snow was coming down. The snow was starting to melt. The temperatures, of course, like I say, were above freezing. Eventually what happened, temperatures began to drop. And when they dropped below freezing, the roads became a sheet of ice. And again, around this time is when you had all of these folks on the road trying to get home, trying to get to their destination. You had a lot of school children, some of which, incidentally, by the way, did not even make it home that night. Their parents couldn't get to school to come pick them up, or the school buses could not get to the school to pick them up and take them on home because the roads were just so congested. So you had some children who were sleeping in school on mats in the gymnasium, of course, under adult supervision, because some of those teachers could not get home either. I'm assuming that they raided the cafeteria and all the kids got fed. But imagine yourself having a child in elementary or grade school, and they cannot get home because of the bad weather, because of traffic so backed up. I would be a nervous wreck. If I was going to go back about 20 years ago when my kids were that age, I would be a total wreck knowing that my children were somewhere else and not at home in their own bed in the comforts of their very own home. But that's exactly what happened. The roads became a sheet of ice, like we say. There was total gridlock everywhere. You had people who were completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Many motorists had no food, they had no water, and I'm not talking about just the drivers, I'm talking about the passengers in the vehicles too. You had people without their medication. Folks were not prepared for something like this to happen. For the past couple weeks, I have been talking about weather here on the program and some of the big winter storms that have hit the Midwest as well as the Northeast. And lately, the Northeast has been getting a lot of bad weather. And these folks up here, and I can just imagine what they're thinking. Here is the Southeast getting maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches of snow, and the whole city shuts down. The whole city panics. The whole city just goes off the rocker because they have a little bit of snow on the ground. When, in fact, in the Midwest and up there in the Northeast, they get 2 to 3 inches, or not 2 to 3 inches, but 2 to 3 feet of snow. And that hits the ground, and folks are used to that. Folks are prepared for that. And some folks are used to driving in those type of conditions too. Here in the South, you don't have people running to the tire store every winter to get their summer tires taken off and getting their winter tires put on, and some of the tires with studs in them and the chains put on them as well. Driving in those conditions up there, again, some people are quite used to it. And I know that for a fact because I am a native of Pennsylvania, and for many years I have lived in those conditions. I have driven in those conditions, and if I were up in that area looking down on all the folks, and I shouldn't use that term looking down because that sounds kind of derogatory in a way, but no, what I'm saying is if you're looking at what's happening in the news and you're seeing all these folks here and wondering how on earth are they gridlocked with maybe just 1 inch or 2 of snow on the ground. Well, come on down here and try it out for yourself and see exactly what happens. The city will shut down. The city will go absolutely chaotic if people are not prepared. And thanks to the officials responsible for preparing and for alerting the motorists, this is exactly what happened. This is what occurred. Now, again, they have been apologizing profusely and are still doing it to this very day. Let's hope something like this never happens again. And let me tell you folks, that line right there that I just used, if somebody will go ahead and take this recording and send it to their local politicians, here I am, I was all ready to blast the local officials for saying that, but because it is such a common excuse anytime something goes wrong and local officials are caught off guard and they are forced to face the cameras and the microphones and face their constituents. It's the same excuse each and every time that something goes wrong. And what do they say? We're going to investigate this, we're going to check this out, and we're going to make sure something like this never happens again. How many times have you heard that, folks? Countless. And they all use it. I don't know if they learned that in Politics 101 before they assume office after they've been elected. But it's the same excuse that they're constantly using. We're going to make sure something like this never happens again. Please admit that you screwed up and tell us what you're going to do the next time so something like this doesn't happen again. All right, well, I'm going to get off my political bandwagon right there now because, and folks, and like I say, I was in this here too. And it was a mess. And it was not pleasant. And it was not pretty. And I saw some things out there on the road. I have seen people in some of their worst moments when I was stuck on the interstate. And this was in the middle of the night. You had people with nowhere to go. People sleeping in their vehicles. Folks ran their car engines to stay warm. And folks ran out of gas too. There were some folks that went out on the road and weren't even prepared for something like this to happen and didn't even have a full tank of gas. I'd be willing to bet some of them had less than a quarter of a tank before they left home. But they didn't know. I can tell you this much. By the time I woke up and got ready to go out the door And I didn't have the radio on when I woke up. I did not have the television on. I very simply jumped in the shower. I got cleaned up. I packed my lunch, walked out the door, and I saw snow blanketing my front yard. I saw snow in the street, but I didn't give it another thought. It didn't occur to me that the temperatures had dropped that bad and the roads were so wet that you had a sheet of ice underneath that snow. I didn't realize it until after I pulled out of my driveway, went down the street, went up to the top of the hill, and that's right there where I saw a vehicle spinning their tires, trying to climb this small upgrade, and there were folks behind them who unfortunately had to slow down, and as a result, they started drifting backwards. This is how bad it was. It really didn't bother me that much because, first of all, I drive a pickup truck. I've always owned a truck, so I've got great traction. Number two, I'm quite used to driving in these conditions. What slows me down, what stops me dead in my tracks, are folks just like this who have no experience driving in these conditions, who probably wouldn't be out there had they had been alerted ahead of time by their officials to stay on home. And yes, I've heard that quite a bit throughout the morning too. If you don't have anywhere to go, please stay on home. Well, folks, by that time it's too late. You had tons of motorists out on the road who were absolutely stuck. I don't know how bad it really was on the back streets, because I was on the interstates and that's where the worst of it was. And if you by chance have not followed the local and national news stories concerning this storm, you can look them up online right now. You can just put in your Google search engine Winter Storm 2014 Atlanta, Georgia, and there it will be. A lot of stories will come up, a lot of videos will come up, and a lot of pictures will be there in front of you to look at too. And you will see firsthand what a lot of folks were facing in their overnight experience, should I say camping experience, on the interstates. Nobody wants to relive that. But you know, folks, sometimes lessons can be learned. I can promise you there are so many people now who probably have put together an emergency kit inside their car. So in the event they do get stranded, again, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of whether or not they are caught up in a storm, whether or not their vehicle breaks down, but you know, everybody who goes inside their vehicle, starts their engine, plans on leaving from point A and arriving at point B without any problems. Sometimes very unlikely, but sometimes it does not happen. Sometimes you're going to be forced to stop for the night. And let's just hope that you don't ever be faced with a lot of folks here in the South had to face no more than 2 weeks ago. Here's something else that a lot of people were forced to deal with. We had emergency response vehicles and personnel already on the roads, ready to respond when they were alerted to do so. But again, like I said, folks, by that time, it's already too late. You had folks calling 911. You had folks requesting emergency assistance, requesting an ambulance. You can only imagine folks who had not taken their medication, maybe their heart medication or their diabetes medication, which was at home. And they were probably scheduled to take it several hours ago. What's going through their mind? What's going through their loved ones' minds? You had folks in the EMS centers that were faced with hundreds and hundreds of calls from stranded motorists. EMS personnel were faced with the same weather conditions that these drivers were faced with out on the roads. And here's something else. Some of the callers who were calling 911 requesting assistance didn't even know where they were. They were stuck between exits on an interstate. And all they know is they were caught up in hundreds and hundreds of vehicles that were stranded the same as they are. Imagine yourself having to put a 911 call in somewhere, and saying, hey, I need help, come get me. Where exactly are you? Well, I'm on the interstate. I'm driving a blue Ford pickup. And that's all they know. Imagine having to be an EMS personnel, say an EMS ambulance driver who had to go out there and look for you. It would be tough. Among the hundreds of cars that are out there, you would have to be asking yourself, which one is the patient in? And here's something else. I know up in the north, and I don't think much has changed over the past, how long have I been down here now? I've been down here about 28 years. But in the north, when it comes time for the snow plows to go out there, you've got these big trucks with the plows on them, and in the back, they are laying salt down on the road to melt the snow. Now, here in the south, they use sand. The sand trucks could not get past the gridlocks to treat these roads. So how did they remove these vehicles from the roadway? They had to do it one at a time. And in a lot of cases, they had to wait until the temperatures warmed up the very next day to melt the ice that was in the roadway before any of these vehicles could move. Now, in the end, and I don't have any solid numbers here in front of me, folks, but I can tell you this, there were more than 1,400 accidents in the metro Atlanta area over that 2-day span. There were more than 300 people reportedly injured, and we know of at least one weather-related fatality. I don't know exactly how that person died. It's sad that it did happen, but we do know one thing, that people were absolutely furious. And again, you have your public officials apologizing profusely because of what had happened. Now, this has been making the news, and almost every day we're hearing a few bits and pieces on it. As time goes on and the weather gets better, this will probably be forgotten about until the next storm strikes. Our local and state officials here have promised to do better. In fact, this past week, the governor formed a winter weather task force that is supposedly made up by a bunch of meteorologists who will get together. They will put their heads together and they will decide exactly when a weather alert will go out. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. But I can tell you this much, folks, and I've got the printout here from the National Weather Service that covered the north and central Georgia winter storm. Again, keep in mind, a lot of this happened on the 28th. I was going into work the night before. And what day was that? Let me take a look here to make sure I don't have my dates all screwed up, because I am going into work on a late night. It was a Tuesday night. And here I am driving my normal route to go to work, and I am seeing all of these vehicles coming in the opposite direction, and they are all at a standstill. I have no problem inbound, but it's the outbound traffic that is all jammed up. And again, keep in mind that because of the time of night it was, and because of the fact that I was sleeping before all of this happened, I am not being alerted to what is going on. I can hear the weather reports talking about people stranded on the roadways, but I'm not hearing anything as to how this was able to happen. It didn't dawn on me on my way in. But again, I'm going at a very low speed. I do have the traction because I have a truck and I am able to get by. It wasn't until I probably got, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 miles away from the city limits before I ran into gridlock. But on the way in there, I'm seeing all of these vehicles stuck on the opposite side of the road coming outbound. It's not dawning on me, it didn't sink in immediately that these were the folks who had been out on the road since like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And here it is, 10, 11 o'clock at night. These are people who are coming home from work that are still on the roadway. Why are they sitting out there and I am not? I'm moving right along. Okay, it just didn't dawn on me at the time that this was the outbound rush hour traffic that was stuck. I saw tractor trailers that were jackknifed. I saw buses that were turned around sideways. In fact, at the end of this show here, I'm going to take a photograph that I shot with my smartphone while I was stuck on the roadway. And keep in mind, when you look at this, I was off to the side. I was sitting behind a tractor trailer, and there were like 3 lanes of open traffic, open roadway to the very left of me. And the roads may look wet to you, but believe me when I tell you this, folks, this was a sheet of ice, and nobody was driving on it, including myself. Even if I could, I probably would not have, out of fear of losing control of my vehicle and either hitting a retaining wall or possibly running into a parked vehicle that is off to the side of the road. The fact was, I was stuck behind a tractor trailer. And sadly, I saw some of the people who were stuck out there with me in the worst times of their life. There were folks that were asking me, well, what did people do when it came time to use the bathroom? I'm not going to go and give anybody a play-by-play, but I'm going to tell you this much. Folks did what they had to do. And it's not by choice, all right? You know, when you've got to go, you've got to go. You've heard that before. But it should not have happened out there, and it should not have happened under the circumstances that it did. Anyway, just to give you an idea of where the state and local officials dropped the ball. Here's the product timeline from the National Weather Service. And again, you can pick this up on their website. I went ahead and did so, and I printed it off. But there was a winter storm watch originally issued for central Georgia, including South Metro Atlanta, from 10 a.m. Tuesday until 1 p.m. That was on the 26th of January, 2 days before the storm. There was a briefing sent out to the government and the media partners a little bit later on. Actually, it was about 15 minutes later. I don't want to say later on. I'm just looking at the numbers right here. Yeah, it was like 3 minutes later. On Monday, that was at 3 p.m. Sunday. Now, on Monday, early morning at 4:53 a.m., the winter storm watch was expanded to include the entire metro Atlanta area. And what were state and local officials doing? They were sitting on their hands. They were taking a, well, let's wait and see approach. At 8:35 that morning, there was a tweet that was sent out. And that tweet included notification of significant snow moving in rush hour on Tuesday. And they said, don't make plans, or should I say, don't wait to make plans for school or work. We can throw rocks all we want to at our state and local officials. All right, but that also is going to include your local school boards too, because they are a government of their own. And they make decisions as to whether or not schools are going to be open or schools are going to be closed. And they too had dropped the ball. Of course, they will probably turn around, and they probably are turning around and saying, well, we were waiting to hear from the governor. We were waiting to hear from the mayor. We were waiting to hear from the county commissioner to see what we were going to do. If you are in a responsibility position like you are, and you are going to be responsible for making sure that children arrive at school safely and arrive home safely, you're going to have to take the measures on your own to make sure that that all the elements are in place, and it's going to be safe for the children, not only the children, but also the teachers, the school administrators, and the bus drivers to be out there in those conditions. But they indicated in that tweet, don't wait to make plans for work or school. They said the snow was moving in. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all of these numbers here, okay? But let's see. At Monday, on the 27th at 3:08 p.m., another tweet went out that said winter precipitation will make travel risky across Georgia midday Tuesday into Wednesday. Not a bad idea to stay off the roads if you are able. Not a word from local or state officials on this matter. Moving forward on the 27th, A winter storm watch for North Atlanta metro area upgraded to a winter weather advisory. The first paragraph included the text, "Please understand that even a slight shift in the moisture could result in significant differences in snow amounts and may require an upgrade to a warning." This is on Monday the 27th at 9:36 p.m. Still no word from our local and state officials. I'm going to jump over a couple of these here. At 3:39 a.m. on Tuesday, the 28th, this is the day of the storm. This is going on 4 o'clock a.m. A winter storm warning issued for the entire metro Atlanta area. Winter storm warning remains in effect for central Georgia. A winter weather advisory issued for all of the remainder of North Georgia except 4 counties in the far northwest section of the state. A winter storm warning went out at 3:39 a.m. Tuesday. Yet children went to school. People went to work. You had government workers going to work. And nobody knew of this. Okay, at 1:12 p.m. on Tuesday, upgraded entire county warning area to a winter storm warning. All entire county warning areas went to a winter storm warning. This is at 1:12 p.m. And again, I was probably sleeping at that hour. Because like I said, I'm up and down all day long, but I really wasn't looking out the window to see what was happening. But can you imagine having all this wealth of information? You are an elected official and you are sitting on this. You're not doing anything. You're not warning your citizens of what is happening out there. And next thing you know, it's time to go ahead and react. Let's get the school children home. Let's send all the educators home. Let's send all of the office workers home. Let's send the government workers home. If you need to get off the road, if you need to get home, now's the time to do it. You had a ton of people on the interstate, jamming that interstate. And next thing you know, the temperatures drop, the wet roads turn to ice, the snow continues to fall, people get jammed up in traffic, and that's exactly what we were faced with out there. Now you wonder how I survived the night. Okay, well, I was on my way to work. It was after 10 o'clock. I'm not going to tell you exactly down to the minute what time I left. But like I said, I slept before I knew nothing of the treacherous conditions that were on the roads. I drive in a truck, like it says, with good traction. I got caught up in the gridlock about 5 miles outside of the metro downtown area. I've driven in these conditions before, and one of the things that helped me survive the night was the fact that every night I go to work, I bring a big box lunch and a gallon of fruit drink with me. So I had food, I had what I needed to stay warm, and more so, I had a full tank of gas. So how did I keep myself occupied? Also, too, I'm going to keep this in, throw this out here to you. I had a cell phone charger in my truck. Not very many people carry a cell phone charger in their vehicles. I'm sure a lot of people do now. And being the fact that I have a smartphone, I do subscribe to Netflix, which cost me under $10 a month. I sat there and watched a movie. Again, with a full tank of gas, I was able to run my engine and I was able to stay warm. Temperatures were, like I say, below freezing. If you're going to be traveling anywhere, it's going to be important for you to have an emergency supply box in the trunk of your vehicle. And don't wait for something like this to happen again. Don't wait for you to be out on the road and be stuck in a similar situation and not be prepared. So what do you want to put together in an emergency supply box? Before you turn around and say, well, I don't have any room in the trunk of my car, take a look and see what you do have in there and think about how long you have been carrying those items in the trunk of your car. Some of you probably have been carrying things for 2 or 3 years because you have no place to store it. Take it home, do something with it. If you're not going to use it, throw it out. The trunk of your vehicle should be reserved for, at least a portion of your trunk should be reserved for an emergency supply box. And what do you want to carry in those? First of all, you want to make sure that you have bottled water. That is so important. You want to make sure that you are able to hydrate yourself. You don't know how long you're going to be in an emergency situation, and you don't know how long you're going to be stuck at the side of the road. I don't care if it's on the interstate like I was, or perhaps way off in the distance somewhere, off on a side road where you may not even have cell phone signals. You also want to carry with you non-perishable snacks, something high in protein, not something that's going to spoil. Put them in your box as well. Consider a blanket, a big wool blanket, in the event you have to turn off your engine, or let's just say your vehicle died and you don't have any heat. Let's hope you already are dressed for winter weather conditions if the temperatures are below freezing. But make sure you have a nice wool blanket. I have here at the house an acoustic blanket, and it is heavy, it is warm. If I need to wrap up in that, I will feel like I'm sleeping in a bed. I'm considering putting that behind the seat in my truck. Also, you might want to consider carrying an extra winter coat or a sweater. How many of you have first aid kits in your car? Everybody should have that. That should go without question. But if you don't, go get yourself one and put it in your vehicle, whether you're driving a car, whether you're driving an SUV, whether you're driving a truck. Get you a first aid kit. Every vehicle should have one. Have you ever seen these heat reflective emergency blankets, otherwise known as a space blanket? You can buy these at your camping supply store, and they're only a couple dollars. It looks like a little small packet of aluminum foil, but it opens up into a big aluminum foil sleeping bag. And it is well known as a heat reflective emergency blanket because your body, should I say, projects heat. And if you climb in there and you're doing it for the purpose of staying warm, that heat is going to reflect right back into your body if you're in one of those space blankets. And again, they're only a couple dollars. You should have maybe 2 or 3 of those, depending upon how much passenger space you have in your vehicle. Consider getting some emergency reflective blankets. How about some reading material? If you're not blessed like I am and have a smartphone and have things like Blockbuster or Netflix on there, you're going to be bored out of your mind waiting for things to progress. Waiting for the traffic to start moving or tow trucks moving in to start pulling people out. Get you some reading material, some magazines, some books, something to occupy your time. How about audio CDs? Have you ever been bored half out of your mind and you get tired of hearing the local news and you just want to get away from that? Get some audio CDs with some of your favorite artists and your favorite songs. Make sure you keep those in your vehicles too. You might want to even download some iPhone videos and have them on your smartphone, just in case. Have you ever seen any of these disposable hand warmers? I've got a dozen or 2 of those that I carry with me in my camping supply box. Not that I'm going to have a use for them anytime soon, but they're very neat. You open them up and you kind of smash them with your hand, and the chemicals inside mix together, and they project heat. And they last maybe about a good 40 minutes. They don't cost a whole lot of cash either. So, get yourself some disposable hand warmers. How about flashlights? Everybody should be carrying a flashlight in their vehicle, along with some spare batteries in a plastic bag. Make sure you have a flashlight in the event you lose power inside your vehicle and the dome light goes out. You may need that flashlight to look around. You may need that flashlight to flag down emergency assistance. Let's say if you're off to the side of the road somewhere and nobody can see you and cars are going on by. I don't want to use the word accident or wreck, but if by chance you drift off to the side of the road on a back street somewhere, you may have a dozen or 2, maybe even more vehicles going by you, and nobody even knows you're there. If you have that flashlight, you can get somebody's attention. So, flashlight will come in handy for a number of different reasons. Again, if you don't have a cell phone charger, go to your local convenience store. You can get a cheap one right there. You don't have to pay top dollar at the cell phone store. That's where I got mine from, and it works just fine. Now, having said all that I have so far, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but in the event you get caught in some bad winter weather and you run out of gas, you are cold, would you possibly consider a portable tent heater or some sort of a portable heater in your vehicle to keep you warm? You're going to have to be very careful with this, my friends, because you've got to keep in mind ventilation. And if you don't have your inside of your vehicle properly ventilated and you've got some sort of a propane heater inside there, this could be very dangerous. It's a decision you're going to have to make. I would stick personally, and I would encourage you personally to throw those extra blankets in, to throw an extra coat in there, to throw a sweater or two, just to keep yourself warm in the event you get stranded on the interstate, you get stranded on the road. That's why you call it an emergency supply box. Clean out the trunk of that vehicle. Here's something else you might want to consider too. Make sure that you have a full tank of gas anywhere you go. I don't want to think about how many people went out on the interstate on the 28th, whether going to work or coming home from work, and getting caught up in that traffic with maybe a quarter of a tank of gas. Some of the experts will tell you, well, run your car for maybe 5 minutes every hour and then shut it off. Just take the chill out of that air. You know, it gets very cold outside, my friends, and it's going to be very difficult if you are unprepared, and a lot of people were not prepared that day, as I have already stressed. Thanks to our local officials who took their wait-and-see type attitude, you had folks who were stranded, you had folks who were cold, you had folks at home that were worried sick about the individuals, their loved ones out on the road that had no earthly idea when they were going to be returning home and when things were going to get better. So take this as a learning lesson. Get you a full tank of gas. Keep your gas tank full if possible, especially when you know the winter weather or the bad weather is coming in. How many of you have inspected the spare tire in your vehicle? You want to make sure your spare tire is inflated. Make sure you have a tire pressure gauge with you too. How many of you have a pair of work gloves? It took me a long time to actually latch onto the idea that I should be carrying some work gloves in my truck with me in the event I get a flat tire, in the event I have to open up the hood and get under there and do something. I can't begin to tell you how many times I was out on the road with good clothes and I had no gloves, I had no rags, but I had some tools, and I may have had to change a flat tire, and I had nothing to wipe my hands on. Get you a set of work gloves, get you some rags that you can wipe your hands with. Do you carry flares or reflective triangles in your car with you? Let's say you get stranded off to the side of the road and it's just you. You don't want a car coming up behind you at 55 miles an hour, and especially if it's going to be somebody who is playing with their smartphone, somebody who is texting, somebody that's doing something they should not be doing, and next thing you know, they plow into the back end of you. If it's at nighttime, you want to give every motorist as much early opportunity to know that you are there off to the side of the road, and flares and reflective triangles are there for that purpose. So make sure you have those in your vehicle too. I'm throwing a lot of stuff out here, folks. But, you know, and granted, it's a lot of stuff. Take a look at the inside of my camping supply box, and you wonder, why is he carrying all of that stuff? Why would you carry all of this stuff? You never know when you're going to need it. And talking about spare tires, do you have a jack and a lug wrench in your car? If you don't have a spare tire, if you have a spare tire and you don't have a jack and a lug wrench, that's just like not having a tire, because you're going to have to get out and change it, and you're not going to be Superman. You're not going to be the Incredible Hulk and be trying to lift that vehicle up off to the side and being able to get it up off the road to change that tire. You're going to have a jack and a lug wrench. Make sure you've got that also. Here's something else you may want to carry. I don't, but it probably wouldn't hurt to have it. If by chance you get a small puncture in your tire, but yet it's enough to cause your tire to deflate, you may be able to get some air into that tire very simply by carrying with you a can of Fix-A-Flat. Have you ever seen those in the parts store? You can get them in your department store as well. But your auto parts store will have it. It's a can. It's a Fix-A-Flat. I don't know what it contains, but you supposedly unscrew the cap on that, put it on your valve stem, press it, and whatever comes out of the can goes into your tire. It's supposed to inflate it. It's just a temporary thing, folks, until you can actually get to a tire shop and get that tire repaired. I've never used it, like I say. I've never even bought a can of it, but it might be something you may wish to consider. In situations like we had down here, and of course I'm going to be preaching to the choir for those of you out in the Midwest and as well as up north, tire chains. Do you have a set of tire chains for your vehicle? It's actually unheard of here in the South, because rarely do we have the type of winter conditions that we had no more than a week and a half ago. For the most part, any other times that I can think of when we had winter storms, a lot of people stayed home. They stayed off the road. They called in for work that day. And for those who didn't call in work, their bosses told them don't bother coming in because the roads were that bad. The only other time I can recall a bad situation like we had here was back in March of 1993. And why do I remember that so much? Because my youngest daughter was born in March of 1993. And we got her home just before the winter storm hits. And it shut the city down for 4 days. So the temperatures down here, they can fluctuate. They can go to freezing. The roads can get bad. Hopefully, we're never going to have this problem again. But for the folks who are living out in the Midwest and living up in the Northeast who are sitting back and they were watching all of this here, hopefully you weren't laughing too hard. I know that you're quite used to driving in these temperatures and these conditions on the road down here, and you're better prepared. I'm sure your elected officials up there were better prepared too. And I know some of you, when you're driving out in the heavy snow, some of you will take the precaution and put tire chains on your vehicle before you head on out. Something else you may want to consider, and don't worry about it if this weighs the trunk of your vehicle down just a little bit, but it never hurts to carry a bag of sand, a bag of salt, or even a bag of kitty litter with you. Because if you get into a situation where you get stuck and your rear tires are spinning, if you don't have front wheel drive on your vehicle, and you get into a position where you can't go anywhere, you break open that bag of sand or kitty litter and sprinkle some of that around your back tire, you may have just enough traction to get on out and get on your way. That's provided that you're not caught up in any kind of a traffic jam at all. The best advice I can give you in a situation like this is stay in tune with your local forecast. Get yourself a weather radio. If you get the warning in advance and your local and state politicians don't give you the warning ahead of time, don't wait on them. Take the time to get prepared yourself. And if that means staying home that day, please stay on home. One of the things that folks in the South have been getting laughed about over the years when we have situations like this where they are forced to camp out inside their vehicle, all right, and I understand it was like back in 1982. I wasn't here at that particular time, but there was a really bad storm that moved in that shut the city completely down. And for the longest time after that, anytime the local news reports went out that there was going to be the slightest chance of snow, even if the S word was thrown out there, you would have people running to the grocery store. They would clean out the milk aisle. They would clean out the bread aisle. They would go to the home improvement stores. They would be buying generators. They would be buying kerosene heaters, just at the even mention of the word snow. It was bad for a while, and it really took a lot of time for people to save face. But after what happened a week and a half ago, I'm afraid we're going to be right back to that same situation where people are, and in a way, I can't blame them. I can't blame them one bit. Nobody wants to camp out in their automobile. You don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But unfortunately, that can happen from time to time under these type of conditions. Again, I'm not going to try to say, I'm not going to try to be a broken record here, but if you can possibly afford a weather radio to keep at home and wait for the warnings to go out in advance. Maybe some of these folks here in the South, if they were listening to some of the national weather channels that were broadcasting a couple days ahead of time and putting those warnings out there and getting it well in advance of the information they got from their state and local officials, maybe folks would have been better prepared. And they would have taken the time to either not go to work that day or made some sort of arrangements where they wouldn't have gotten themselves into a situation and got stuck like a lot of these folks did out here. Camping out in your automobile, that's about the only time you're probably ever going to have to do it. I would assume if you're going to a public or a private campground, make sure that you take the tent out of the trunk of your car and set it up. Sleeping on your front seat, folks, that is not the smart thing to do. This is a special hour-long edition of the Happy Camper Radio Show. We're so glad to have you along. And today we have been talking about cold weather camping. We've been talking about emergency camping in your automobile in situations where you really don't want to be. And it's been a very long and informative show, but I am glad to take the opportunity to spend it with you today. It's time now for our featured campground of the week here on the Happy Camper Radio Show. I'm going to take you this week out west where I'm hoping the snow is not really flying at this particular time, but there is a campground out in Oregon. And since we're talking about survival, it's going to take you a little bit to get to this campground. In fact, you're probably going to need a four-wheel drive vehicle to get there. We're talking about the Hauser Sand Campground. It's located in Oregon, and it's open all year round. It is our featured campground of the week here on the Happy Camper Radio Show. And if you haven't already signed up for an account with recreation.gov, now is the time to do that. This time of year, however, all of these sites are walk-in. So you don't need a reservation, but you never know when you're going to be camping out and you're going to be going to different locations and visiting a lot of the recreation.gov sites throughout the year. You're probably going to want to have a reservation system available, and you can do that by signing up online. When you go to this website, in the upper right-hand corner, there is a little gray tab up there. It says sign in or sign up. Click on that. They'll ask you for some brief information, nothing too personal, but it's going to make your reservation process go a whole lot smoother each and every time you go to recreation.gov to reserve your camping reservations. The Hauser Sand Camping in Oregon, it's a sandy area, and a lot of the soft sand of the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area are going to be a little tough to get to. You're going to need your four-wheel drive vehicle. The dune field is known for its wind-scripted sand dunes towering up to 500 feet above sea level. The sand dune terrain is ideal for thrill-seeking off-road riders. A few designated off-road routes include the Hauser Beach Sand Route, the Bark Sand Route, and the Coast Guard Sand Route. Check out their amenities and activities right there on their website. They've got beach access, beach combing, berry picking, fishing, parking area, a self-pay station, and one of my favorites, wildlife viewing. And every one of their campsites there are very pet friendly. Some of the things you know before you go: there's no drinking water available or facilities, so it's going to be extremely primitive. Please bring all your necessary equipment, including water, portable toilets, and fire pans. Please bring your garbage bags. This is a pack-in and pack-out facility. It's run by the state of the state of Oregon. Has some information here on their website, and I'm looking at that right now, just trying to go over it briefly. It appears that anytime you're using one of those off-road vehicles, the motor vehicles, you're going to have a permit for that use. But, all the information is right there on our homepage under the Happy Camper Radio website. Just click on the featured campground tab. It is the Hauser Sand Camping in Oregon, and it is our featured campground of the week here on the Happy Camper Radio Show. And as always, if you have a campground that you would like for us to feature on the program, all you've got to do is drop me an email, Skip, S-K-I-P, at happycamperradio.com. Make sure you include a link to the campground website so we can include it on our website under the featured campground tab. I am about out of wind, and I didn't cough once during this show. I think I'm well on my way to getting better. But anyway, it's good to be back with you again. I'm looking forward to next week when we bring you another fine episode of the Happy Camper Radio Show. Don't forget, you can catch us online anytime at www.happycamperradio.com. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Camp Talker, and add us to your circles on Google+. The Happy Camper Radio Show is a presentation of Skip Huber Productions. I'm Skip. I am a happy camper. No question about it, my friends. You can be a happy camper too. We'll catch you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye, everybody.